Hey guys, today we're going to be working on a 2010 Honda Pilot. Power steering pump went out of it, so we're going to do a replacement on that and hopefully get some power steering back in this thing. So it's going to be a little more detailed than most of them are, most of my videos. So we have our table here to lay everything out, because this engine cover and this, maybe this, I'm not too sure, but I know for sure this engine cover has to come off. So we got this to lay everything out and keep everything organized. So there's these two little twist locks on each side. You just have to give them a half turn and then pop your cover off. Okay, so this is the power steering reservoir. You can see the line runs down in. Right there is the power steering pump. So we'll start tearing into it, get this belt off there and get everything out of the way and get this pump off there. So now we have a 19mm on a 1/2" ratchet. You gotta push towards the firewall to relieve the tension off this belt. There's quite a bit of tension on it, so finally got that one off. That belt has a lot of tension on it. It's not an easy place to get to. So now we're going to use this suction pump to drain this reservoir out a little bit. I picked this transfer pump up from Harbor Freight. It was, I think, like $10 or something. So far it worked out pretty good for me. So okay, now we're going to stuff some shop towels underneath, so that way the oil doesn't get down on the other pulleys, or hopefully it doesn't. Even though we drained this reservoir, there's still going to be some fluid in the line. So another thing to note is you want to put the cap back on the reservoir so nothing falls in there while you're working on it. Okay, then you get yourself some pliers, needle nose, whatever, don't matter. You're going to remove the low pressure clip on the line for the reservoir. You just squeeze it together and pull it back, and then work the hose off there. And there's that excess fluid I was talking about. Which ended up making a pretty good mess. So, okay, then we're going to remove the two bolts on the high pressure line, which comes from behind the motor. And it is two 10mm bolts. They're pretty tight. You're gonna break one loose, and break the other one loose right after. Now, before you take this off, it is important to note that the O-ring you have to replace is in this line. And you're going to want to have some shop towels ready for this line too, because it's going to have some excess fluid in it. Just wiggle it back and forth. And leave the shop towels wrapped around it so no dirt gets in the end of it. Okay, now there's two 12mm bolts that hold this power steering pump in there. One on the top and one kind of towards the bottom. Break one loose. There's bolt number one. Bolt number two, and here's our pump. So now we're going to work on pulling this pulley off and putting it on the new pump, because they don't come with a new pulley on them. Okay, so here's the new pump. You can see there's the high pressure inlet and the low pressure inlet. It's capped off, and so is this one. So we're going to work on pulling them caps off. And this actually takes that fitting. So I gotta change this fitting over, and then pull this pulley off and get it on there and get it back in the car. This pulley doesn't require a puller. You just have to take this nut off, and it's just kind of pressed onto them lines there. So that's what we're doing. Okay, so right now we're pulling this fitting off to put on the new pump. Just a 10mm bolt. And they're pretty tight though. And I'm guessing because the new pump came with two O-rings, I'm guessing there's an O-ring in this too. There is. So we'll have to put a new O-ring in that one. So I put the O-ring on the fitting. So now we're going to install the fitting to the new pump. You're going to push it in, try not to squeeze that O-ring. So that's in there. Get the bolt in. Snug it up a little bit, don't go too crazy. It's not that big of a bolt, so. And then here's our other O-ring, and it's going to go on the high pressure fitting that's on the vehicle. So now we're going to take these to the vise and get this pulley off of this pump and get it on this one. Okay, so we have the old power steering pump in the vise. It wouldn't hurt to, put some cloth or cardboard in the jaws to kind of protect it, especially on the new one. Then you're going to take the nut, and it's a 19mm, and you're going to want to brace something in there so that way the pulley can't turn. It's on there with some good force. So. Take the nut off. And pull your pulley off. Now this can only go on one way. And you can see the that end goes down. This side's just flat. So don't look like it on camera, I guess. There we go. But definitely a difference from that side. Make note of that. And then you're going to want to take your starting fluid or brake clean and just clean the pulley up before installing it. And just slides into place. So you replace the nut. And you just want to snug it up, you know, you don't want to go too crazy with it. It's not a very big stud, so it's not going to spin, you know, completely freely, but just make sure it doesn't have any drift in it and it just spins kind of smoothly. Then you just get the bolts started with your hands. And you bring back in your 12mm socket on the ratchet. And if you have big hands like me, you gotta fight every frickin' thing in your way. Then you take your 12mm socket on your ratchet and tighten them up. Alright, before we reinstall our low pressure line, we're going to stick a funnel in the entry hole for that. Get your power steering fluid. Then you're going to want to stuff some shop towels underneath it for in case you overflow it and when you pull the tube out. Doesn't take a whole lot. You'll just want to put some in until it starts to come out the high pressure hole on the top. Be ready, because it doesn't come out, and then once it does, it pours out quite a bit. So have a shop towel ready for that as well. Okay, now we're gonna remove our funnel, and as you can see, made another mess. Make sure your the pump you buy comes with the O-rings. If it doesn't, you have to get some separate. So we're just going to take a little pick and get in behind it and pull it off, and put the new one on there. Make sure it's in the groove. Pull your shop towels out. Push your high pressure line down in, just work it back and forward. Try not to pinch the O-ring and make it leak. And you're going to replace your bolts. Of course, starting by hand. Take your 10mm and tighten these up. The torque specs on these is 8 foot-pounds. Personally, I'm not too worried about it. I'll just snug them up, and whenever you're tightening these up, try to be even with them so you don't pinch that O-ring, hence causing a leak, and don't drop your extension for the second time. Okay, now we're gonna feed our low pressure line back over. Reinstall it. Grab our pliers and push the clamp back down into where it was. Okay, and then I'm gonna draw up a belt diagram and show you guys. Alright, so here's the diagram I drew up. We have power steering, alternator, idler, air conditioning, crank, and then your tensioner. Alright, so now we're going to work on getting our belt back on all the pulleys. So, we got our diagram here, so I'm going to go off of it. Alright, so now we got the belt all back on and working. We filled up the reservoir. Now we're going to start it up with the cap off and run the wheels from lock to lock and try to bleed some air out if there's any air in the system. So. Alright guys, unfortunately the pump did not fix the problem with the car. Still no power steering, but hopefully it fixes it for you guys, and I'm really hoping it's not a rack and pinion, but it's kind of what I'm leaning towards, so I'm going to do some troubleshooting with it and see if I can figure that out. But otherwise, I hope you guys enjoyed, and you have a good day.